one thing that I've been pretty consistent on, Jesse, and is really bulking up that running game. I think it was something that a lot of 49er fans, during the offseason weren't paying much attention to. They just felt like we fixed the quarterback, we fixed the team. And, I was trying to raise the flag, look, our running game really, really, really fell off last season as well. A lot of that had to do with injuries. A lot of that had to do with just not consistent offensive line play. Also, Kittle going down was a big deal. But we brought back Trent Williams. We signed Alex Mack. We obviously picked up Aaron Backs in the draft. George Kittle is coming back healthy. Mostert should be healthy. And then we brought in Trey Sermon, Mitchell, as well as Wayne Gallman from the Giants. So, and let's, obviously if Trey Lance, let's assume Trey Lance isn't starting initially, and then we could talk about if we add Trey Lance in. But just with those positional moves that we know are going to be playing week one, how good could this running game be? And what do you expect out of it?
Without Trey Lance, I would say I think they can be a top 3 running team. And that's exactly what I would expect from them. Because if this team is as good as what people want it to be, it's going to have to be that.
Right.
And you talked about it, and you're right. You talked about this early. The run game completely fell off a cliff last year, and nobody wanted to bring that up. But let's look at the pieces that were on there. You had the Colemans and the McKinnons who looked very old, very slow, and Coleman couldn't stay healthy. And they replaced him with Sermon and Gallman and just some extra pieces that are definitely going to bring some young, fresh legs and a different dynamic to this team. Now, Wilson being out certainly hurts, but he'll be back probably week 6, week 7, somewhere around there, and he'll have fresh legs, which will be a good thing for this team. So, yes, I think with Trey Lance not being in there, I would expect top 3, and that's what everybody should hope for.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this running game is going to be a little bit different than what we saw in 2019 because of having an all-pro center back there. Because I think sometimes when it comes to the nuances of the offensive line game, people don't realize how important that center is. And that was one position last year. We were on a 4th string center at one point last season. And the center is the quarterback of that offensive line. They're so imperative in calling out certain reads. They're so important in making shifts and things of that nature. And I think that we haven't had, the type of center that an Alex Mack is in a long time. Even, with Weston Richburg being as good as he is, I don't think he's ever had a peak like Alex Mack has had in the league. So Alex Mack is probably the best center that, the 49ers have had in quite a while. So, if Aaron Banks ends up being the right guard, I think that's going to do wonders for him. Obviously, the leadership that Alex Mack brings is something that the offensive line has missed ever since Staley retired. I think that was, well shown last season. Even though Trent Williams is a stud, he isn't necessarily the leader that I think the 49ers needed on that offensive line.
He's a better player as an individual, but
correct.
He doesn't make everybody else around him better. Yeah, I get
right.
that.
Or at least he probably makes guys around him by his play, but not necessarily like he's kind of out for himself. He seems like maybe somebody who might be a little bit for himself before the team. And I don't know that factually. I'm just saying he's not the vocal leader that I guess the offensive line needs. Alex Mack, I think, is going to step into that role immediately. Yeah. He obviously knows Kyle Shanahan's offense like the back of his hand because, he had all those all-pro seasons with Shanahan as the offensive coordinator there in Atlanta. And I think that we're going to, because we have such a great center there, and I was talking to Silverado Kev, we're going to have the option to not just run on the outside anymore. We're going to have the opportunities with a guy like Banks and Mack there to start running inside zone as well. And with that as another option, I think it becomes pretty unstoppable to stop this running game. Because think about an option where you have like a Mostert and then you have like a Debo doing like a jet sweep. And then if let's say Trey Lance is there, you
Okay.
know, you don't know if like Trey Lance could just read it, he could go up the middle, he could pitch it out to a Mostert, or he could, you know, throw it out to a Debo, and you don't really know where it's coming. You have all of this speed at three different levels, going at three different ways. I think we could. I think it's not. It wouldn't be shocking if we had the best running game this season, and that's even with Baltimore and Lamar Jackson, especially if Trey Lance is there. But even without Trey Lance, I just think I'm really excited about Alex Mack and obviously Kittle being there. I think our offensive line play is going to be huge, just like you said, which means the running game is going to be even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Trey Lance is there, yes, I expect it to be the best running game. I'm with you on that. Just that added dynamic of having a quarterback that can keep it. And you're right. It can be inside zone, it can be outside zone, it can be traps, it can be whams. There's so many things that this team can do now because they literally have a back and an offensive line combination that can fit all of them. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something that's very exciting. And to your point, when you watch this offense and the way that Shanahan in the run game in the past has put linebackers in complete conflict, and now you add in a quarterback to all of that. So you've got 4 to 5 options on every play and it all looks the same. Good luck stopping it. And I can't wait until week 3. And if Trey Lance is starting, they are going to rush for 300 yards on Green Bay. I'm calling it right now.
You know what? And what's funny, Jesse, is we've talked about all of these pieces, and we haven't even mentioned Juszczyk,
I
who is
know.
like one of the best fullbacks, if not the best fullback in
Yeah.
the game, that is coming back healthy, and he's gonna just be able to eat. You know what I mean? Because he's gonna have guys behind him that he knows can hit the hole as quick as they need to. It's gonna push him to get to that block much quicker because these guys are coming out with a lot of speed behind them. I think that this running game is going to be extremely exciting. I know you called it as far as like week 8 with Green Bay, but I assume we're going to see a lot of games like we saw with Green Bay in the NFC Championship game in 2019, where the running game is going to take over, and it's going to be where the running game is gashing people just like it would be passing plays. And I wouldn't be surprised if all three of those running backs we were mentioning, as far as the starters, are averaging 4 yards a carry, just like in 2019. And that wouldn't be a surprise for me, and that would be amazing to see again.
Here's the other thing to be excited about: short yardage. Even in 2019, the 49ers struggled in short yardage situations. You got in the goal line, you didn't, you know what I mean? It was always like, can they finish? Can they score here? Can they punch it in on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 against, I think it was Baltimore, where we ended up passing because it felt like we couldn't win in short yardage situations. And
Mm-hmm.
now, and last year we definitely couldn't win in those situations. This year we are winning in those situations.
Right.
Absolutely. You have Sermon running behind a Kittle and a Juszczyk, or Lance running behind those guys, quarterback sneaking, whatever. Yeah, I think short yardage and goal line situations, this team will be much better.
And I expect, hopefully, you know, the announce team will kind of shout out Alex Mack to give, you know, the fans an understanding of how much he's doing and how
Yeah.
much the that he changes the offensive line, because you know, I think that might be one of the best pickups we had. You know, that went kind of underneath the radar. Obviously, it was kind of guaranteed. Everybody knew that he was coming, but I don't
Yeah.
think people understand how important of a piece to get a guy of that caliber in a position where we were in desperate need. You know, he's going to help out whoever's the starting quarterback look much better, regardless of, you know, who that starter is.
That center does mean so much to this team, and you're absolutely right. And it's exactly why I really wanted the 49ers to go after Lindsley. And I was okay letting Trent Williams walk over it because I felt like they could bring in somebody who's still a decent left tackle and Lindsley being young, coming from a very similar offense, almost the same offense, really, in Green Bay. I just felt like that center position was so important. And everybody wants to talk about 2019 Richburg. They talk about his individual PFF grade and some of the grades that are out there on him. Yes, as an individual, he didn't do a lot, but the fact that he is the quarterback of that offensive line, as you said, and was able to call out those protections and get everybody in the right place, there it goes way beyond an individual grade as far as what they bring. So even if Mac doesn't have the best quote unquote PFF grade, the fact that he's putting everybody else where they need to go, it's so important for this offense and being effective.
Um, Kali Young says McGlinchey is the weak link on the offensive line. Jesse, can you
Not in the
talk
run
about
game.
why? Can you talk about why that may have been true in the past, but why we don't think that that's going to be the case this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, yes, in the past game, he certainly has been the weak link. But we just talked about it. The center position, getting people in the right places, that's extremely important. Now you've got the leadership aspect, which McGlinchey clearly needs. He needs somebody who can be a leader on this line. They tried to bestow that upon him when Staley retired, and it just was not a good fit. Then you talk about the weight that he's put on, which I think is going to be extremely important. I don't think McGlinchey is going to be as weak of a link this year as he was last year. I think that there's a lot of factors that went into it. And I think that they've addressed all the factors as much as they could. And again, if this team is running downhill most of the game, that's where McGlinchey excels. And you can go look at any grade out there. In the run game, he is elite. In the pass game, he is piss poor. So even if that trend continues, if this team is running the ball the way that we expect him to, he will be very effective because of that.
Yeah, and whomever, like, another issue that that McGlinchey had last season was just a constant rotation at that right guard position. So one thing that whether it's Brunskill or whether it's Banks that takes that right guard position, there's going to be some continuity there along the offensive line that was just missing last season. I'm not saying McGlinchey was great last season, but I think he was the scapegoat a lot of times, and there was a lot more nuance in why the offensive line wasn't playing as well. I think McGlinchey got the worst of it, probably because Grant Cohn is a big, is really great at, putting McGlinchey on blast. But I believe that this is going to be kind of a resurgent year for him, and some of it's going to be from his work ethic, but a lot of it is also going to be continuity on that offensive line and having a captain at center again that's going to make sure everybody's in the right position. So there's not like blown calls, which is why we had so many. That's why the offensive line play was so bad last season.
The other thing too is when a player recognizes that they didn't live up to what is expected of them, which he clearly does. He talked about it and how it really did eat him alive all last season and throughout the offseason. That's a player that's motivated to get better and is going to do everything they can to maximize the potential that he has. So that bodes well for McGlinchey also.
I agree. And Sean Kaliohi, sorry, Sean, if I butchered your last name, man. We will need to draft a center next year to learn from Mac. I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if our second round pick goes to a center next season. Mm-hmm. That's how important it is. And Alex Mack, we know, isn't going to be there for our long-term solution. He probably is here for 2 years max. So if we could get a guy that comes in next season, could sit a year behind Mac, really learn what's going on, and then take over the position the year after, I think that would be best case situation for the 49ers. Sure.